Oh, yeah, okay. Hi, video. So anyway, just a little sort of brief intro, really. I learned my design chops in a print shop. So how many of you guys ever worked in or used a print shop in a professional capacity? Great, okay, you're my compadres. I'll buy some of you a beer, there's too many later. So that's how I learned design, as basically like an apprentice. And that's in the early 90s, 1991 is when I started. The web came along in the mid-90s, and we all got involved in it, and we all got really excited about it as designers. It was all really complicated. My brother came to me in the early 90s and said, he said, bro, I'm going to be a web designer. And I was like, what are you talking about? It's a web designer. And he said, oh, you know, you write code and like stuff happens on the computer screen. And I was like, oh, okay, that sounds cool. So we got into it that way. Anyway, fast forward a few years, we're working on the web, we're doing all sorts of interesting things, and then we've got this sort of problem, basically. And nothing really works that well. I have a friend, and he works at BT, and he's got a computer that BT's given him on this Apple computer, which was black plastic, if you can believe, was running Netscape. So I'd made something, looked at it on Netscape, and there was nothing there. And I was like, it's a crash course, right? So I'm going to fast forward a little bit to a day in October 2002. I've been working on the web for a few years. I've got my head around how to do tables, TD, 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 for all of you who remember it. Oh, crap, I want to change that. Okay, we're going to go back again. Delete, delete, delete. And it's 2002, it's October. I'm 29 years old, and I'm sitting in my office at home. And I saw this. Who remembers this? God, some of you are so old. This is Wired News in 2002. In October, it launched. I had no prior knowledge of this at all. I saw it, and I was like, oh, cool, Wired's got a new site. Let's have a look. First thing you do, web designer, view source. And I was just like, wow, oh my God. Totally blew my head off, like utterly blew my head off. There's only two sites of any scale at this time that actually deployed web standards. One was Wired, and the other one was the University of Salford, done by Patrick Lauker. Those were the only two. And I don't know which came first, but the first one I saw was Wired. And suddenly, the kind of like the world opened up, and I thought, okay, we're going to make some massive progress here. This is a really, really big deal. And other people agreed with me. Because in an article about Wired, they actually referenced browser wars. Like, you know, it's Wired magazine talking about the browser wars. And the browser wars is what we dealt with every day, pretty much. And then when Eric Meyer said this, he said, I can't overstate the importance of Wired News, new design. And then importantly, the site will be a great deal easier to maintain. What Eric is doing here is really clever, right? He's been interviewed for Wired magazine. He's not talking to web developers. He's not talking to web designers. He's not talking to anybody. What he's talking to is he's talking to all the people who make the decisions about what kind of websites get made. Because the whole argument at that point wasn't about what kind of technology we should use, really. It was about why should we change the table stuff that you guys deal with every day and hate? Because it works. And then when Jeffrey wrote about it, he hit the nail absolutely smack bang on the head like he so often does. And he basically predicted what was going to happen from that point forward. Wired did it. That was the argument. Anytime I came up against this rebuttal about web standards, that was the argument. Wired did it. Let's have a look at that. And as a designer working at that time, you know, we were all coding, and we were just basically like ripping each other off, really. Someone would do something, solve a thing. Sometimes they'd publish it, sometimes they wouldn't, but we'd just go and look, right? And then we'd play with it and keep iterating on it. And, you know, Rachel was talking about this earlier. And that culture, I think, still pervades what we do today, and it still definitely does for me. So the reason I'm going through this little bit of history is because what I want to do here in this talk is, when we're looking at things like Wired, is look at where we've come from and look at how it influences where we are today, and explain to you how I extrapolate from that about my own practice, about where we're going to go in the future. And like it or not, it might sound a little bit self-referential, but all of us in this room working on the web, and give me an idea who you are actually. Who class themselves as a designer? Okay, there's not many of us. Okay, we need to get out of here fast. Who's a web developer? Okay, all right. Who solves design problems they feel like in their work? There you go. You're all designers, really, let's be honest. The reason I want to do this is because going forward, I think it's going to be really, really important because we shape the future in our conversations with our colleagues, with our clients, with the audience that we serve. We shape how our industry will be going forward in the future. And we're being kind of a little bit dragged to one side at the moment by a lot of external pressures, mostly commercial pressures. And I want to have a little conversation about that today by looking back about where we've come from. So no more slow to load pages and web designers gone mad. So fast forward a bit, 17 years later, it's 2019 now, and look how far we've come. I mean, these are just sort of some rough stats that I won't read out to you. Can you see them all right? If you can't, 587 million online in 2002. In 2019, 4.1 billion. 0.15 megabits connection, average speed in 2002 when Wired launched. 102. I wanted to kind of represent this a little bit. Sorry, does my voice go away when I turn that way? A little bit? Okay, I'll try not to do that. I'll try and robot it. All right, so I wanted to represent what this means in actually visually. So I thought, right, I'll typeset 2002, and then I'll typeset 2019, and I'll do them mathematically precise to the difference in speed. And 2002 is so small, I had to put a circle around it. This is where we've got to. So then, when I was first doing this talk, usually I give talks about very practical typography-given stuff, because that's my first love. Type will always be my first love. But when I was first doing this talk, I was going to give it an event apart, and I wanted to do an example of a problem that we're still facing. This is live video. This is me waiting for a site to load on an iPad Pro, which isn't really that old. And this is live, right? There it is. That was live. So hold on, the connection speed's gone like this. Technology has gone really great, and we can do all these amazing things. What is that? By the way, the Wi-Fi connection was good. I'm not a complete idiot. So, and then at the same time as I did that little video, I emailed Working Class Heroes, which is such a great name for a shop for someone like me who's half working class Welsh and Chinese and generally kind of oppressed from every direction, including at home. And Adam replied with this, because I was saying, Adam, I can't give you any money. I'm trying to check out, dude. I want to give you money desperately. Please help me give you money. And this is his reply. And this is my reply to Adam was, no, Adam, just no, dude. It's 2018 at this point. And it doesn't even make sense. Apple's latest update has messed with our site. Did it? My God, you get some personal attention. I wish I got that kind of personal attention. Our site is optimized for Google Chrome. Wait, what? 2018. I didn't even know I'd have that conversation with Adam at all. But why? So why? And this is my answer in a word, entropy. Entropy being the things always, well, that's the nice explanation. Things always basically end up turning to shit. Sorry, video. They do. And as designers and developers and people building systems, part of our job is to try and deal with that, right? We know at some point we're going to get some content from someone who's using this site. It's going to break something. Rachel was talking about how to handle that just now, which was great. But we know these sort of problems. We're going to get some commercial pressures. They're going to want to add this. It's going to degrade eventually. There's going to be, Apple's going to mess with our site. God, I hate that company so much. No, not at all. So, entropy. And we solve it with design. That's my personal opinion. We solve it first and foremost with design. We don't solve it with polyfillers and with clever development checks all the time. The first point of contact that we have with a problem is in design. And that's where we can solve it most of the time. That's what I think. Because the job, as a designer, my job is to mitigate entropy, to think about how this might be used, what might happen, and to try and make things better by thinking about those kind of conditions that this thing might be used in, or it might need to change into in the future. Because fundamentally, what we're trying to do here is, it's all about quality of life. We're trying to improve quality of life for ourselves, for our clients, for their audience, for anybody who needs to come into contact with this code. For ourselves, not to be too precious, as a species, we're trying to improve quality of life. There's lots of different routes that we can get there, and we can argue about that all day, but fundamentally, that's really what we're trying to do. And design has a role to play with that, and working on the web has a role to play. So how do we get to this point? I want to go way back and give you some context of my thinking about this. So 100 years ago, Picasso did this. I I'm not even sure if I like it, actually, to be honest. It's a really hard thing to like, but I always thought it was really interesting. And what this is sort of late 1911, early 1912, he did this. The reason this is important is because this is almost the first ever collage, at least a commentary collage, in art history as we understand it. Now, I want to focus on this for a second and not go too deep, but give you some context. This is 1911, 1912, right? This is the very earliest point of modernism. Before this is Art Deco, before that is Art Nouveau. This is when the world is changing in its ideas and it's reacting against mechanization, against industrialization. People who are thinking about this stuff are getting worried. They're like, okay, how does this stuff serve human beings? These machines that we've got so much control and power over. And at the same time, as an artistic movement, modernism is starting to be a challenge to the existing establishment. No longer is it always about very, very literal compositions laid out in one medium. So what Picasso's doing here is, and this weird thing that I struggle to like, is you can see the chair caning bit. That chair caning isn't chair caning, that's chair caning photograph printed onto canvas. So he's just completely overturned the whole idea of using some kind of material in a different way, because he wanted it to be literal chair caning, or seem that way. And then also on here is other things like a pipe, and there's a newspaper, Le Journal in Paris. There's all sorts of odd things going on, this kind of like cubist weird stuff, right? What he's doing is he's trying to describe what it's like to look through a glass tabletop down onto a cane chair below it. But he's doing it using mixed media, a collage. And that thing that he does there translates directly into how we experience information right today. Because in some ways we live in the collage aesthetic today, because what the collage aesthetic led to is also montage and film. Before this point, most storytelling, like I'm kind of doing now to you, is very linear, right? It follows time. Usually follows one perspective, one point of view. After this, things started to happen that we just take for granted. Film comes along and it gives you one point of view, say a family sitting around a table. And then it switches to the other point of view, which is appropriate at this time, of, say, one of the sons of that family at war, okay? So we have all this kind of interesting stuff going on about this montage collage idea, moving through space and time, moving through distance and perspectives to provide information. And that's the web that we have today, constantly providing us with information from all sorts of different points of view in different places. But it's the modernism bit in this, which I find really important. And so around about the same time, there's this guy called Peter Behrens, he's an architect. And he has this amazing job title. He's an artistic consultant for AEG. Okay. If I met someone and I said, what do you do for a living? They say, oh, I'm the artistic consultant for Sharp, Sony. I'd be like, what is that? What does that mean? Like, you'd assume, oh, this is the person who buys art for offices, right? And the reason he had this job title, artistic consultant, is because the job that he did hadn't even been invented yet. He invented this job. And he was basically the very first industrial designer. Peter Behrens also, so he hand drew AEG's first corporate typeface. He developed their branding for them. He developed the first complex branding the world's really ever seen. Brand system, if you like. He designed the turbine hall. He designed a fan, a clock. This guy's prolific, but his job title is artistic consultant. What he's doing is he is the first person who puts design at the center of a company, really, because of his personal power, kudos, charisma, call it whatever you will. And AEG indulge this, and they make a massive success out of it. And at the same time as Peter Behrens is doing this for AEG, he's involved, he's a founder member of the Deutsche Werkbund. Has anybody heard of this? Okay, brilliant. So Deutsche Werkbund, just to skim it over the top, is this is a bunch of architects and artists and other sort of people who are concerned about mechanization, about industrialization. They're concerned that people are going to lose their skills, their craft that they've had for generations in making things. And they're basically riffing off the idea of William Morris and the arts and crafts movement, who wanted to see still the hand of the maker in the objects that we use today. And what Werkbund wanted to do was take the craftsmanship of art or design or making things that wasn't even called art and design then, because if you made tools, you were just a blacksmith, right? take that craftsmanship, smash it together with mass production, and completely open up and democratize the availability of really high quality stuff to everybody. That's our mass market today, isn't it? Supposedly. Except Deutsche Werkbund could see a problem with this, because before this modernist movement of Werkbund, we had Art Deco and Art Nouveau, and that was for rich people. That's fine, lovely things made by craftsmen that cost the equivalent of somewhat of 6 months' wages for a person working in a factory, for example. Okay, so this is slightly political for me, but you'll have to indulge me slightly. But they saw this as a problem, because why should it only be rich people who had access to high quality stuff? Does it kind of ring a bell today a little bit, maybe? Okay, so Werkbund has seen this, and the part of Werkbund involved in it, who was an apprentice to Behrens, was this guy, Van der Rohe. Van der Rohe also was the last director of the Bauhaus. So you can see the lineage here, can't you? You see all the stuff that's going on in the early 20th century. Behrens, then Van der Rohe. He designed this. What's interesting about this is because it's almost a direct descendant. I mean, this is a reproduction of the Barcelona Pavilion, but it's almost a direct descendant of that collage. Modernism fundamentally is about authenticity of materials, about using the things in the way that they should be used and representing them properly, and trying to create a world for humans to live in better, trying to make things better. And then decades later, you'll know this place. This is probably the most famous modernist house ever, right? Falling Water by Frank Lloyd Wright. It's a slightly different point of view, because the traditional one, looking down the gorge at the waterfalls, annoys me. I've seen it far too many times. So Frank Lloyd Wright's doing exactly the same thing. He's using materials in the most honest way he can to try and create a different way of living. I'm sorry if that picture's not really that great on the screen, but I'm going to point something out to you. This is the interior, and what's here is a massive rock. Now, it looks like he could have just been a bit of a nutter and he wanted a massive rock in his lounge, okay? But that's not what's happening here. This is very deliberate. That rock existed there before they built the house, and he incorporated all these natural elements and materials. He incorporated the natural world into his life, into his life and his work, and also into the life for this family who commissioned this as a kind of country house, right? And that's modernism, that modern materials, modern production techniques, trying to democratize all this sort of thing if you can, trying to make it available to everyone, but having an authenticity about the materials and about what you're doing and your intention behind it. So what you've got Behrens, Van der Rohe, who was in charge of the Bauhaus when Hitler shut it down in 1932. You've got the Eames, and you've got a direct lineage to Dieter Rams. Dieter Rams, Johnny Ive's inspiration, although he's gone slightly off the path since then. Dieter Rams referenced Behrens as one of his heroes, one of his inspirations. And they were designing and trying to democratize design itself, trying to make it available to everyone. But we end up today here. This is where we end up. Van der Rohe's Barcelona chair, if you buy it from the official licensed people, costs 4,700 quid. Who spends 4,700 quid on a chair? If you have spent 4,700 quid on a chair, do not tell me. It will color our relationship very fundamentally. The Eames design was supposed to be fully democratic. This is a comfortable, easy to produce, mass-produced chair using really easily available materials, fiberglass and steel at the time. 390 quid. For God's sake, people. And Visto, this is an amazing system, Visto. It's been made for decades and decades. It's supposed to be you buy a little bit, and then you buy a little bit more, it all fits together, and you move it from house to house wherever you go, and you end up with this whole storage system, which is amazing. Except, to buy this costs 932 quid. Who the hell? No wonder IKEA's a thing. For God's sake, right? So I'm looking at all this, and I have this running around my brain, and occasionally when I'm not working flat out, trying to just actually earn a living, I think about this sort of stuff, and it leads me down a path about where do I want my practice to go. And I'm hoping there's something in this for you guys to take away as ideas to mull over yourself. So I came up with this whole idea, these three words that are really important to me: durable, inclusive, and aesthetic, as principles of my practice and what I want to do. Now, I'm not going to say it's easy. I'm not going to say, hey, every client that we have, we can find money to do loads and loads of really good stuff and be really ethical in the way that everything gets done. And that's not the real world that we live in. but where we can make a difference, we try to, right? As long as we don't end up on Stokes Croft with a bowl, which is where I live. So I'm not doing the area down. I actually kind of like it. So what does durable actually mean? Well, the definition is to withstand wear, pressure, or damage, hard wearing. But durability to me is about relationships. It's about relationships we have with code, relationships we have with devices, relationships we have with our colleagues and our audience. And it's about building durable relationships across all those kind of different areas, all those things that we have to interact with in our work. Because fundamentally, one of the problems that we have at the moment is we live in an attention economy. Every single big business on the web is fundamentally just trying to get people's eyeballs on them, just trying to get some kind of attention on what they're doing. And we're all competing for that same space, effectively, with the work that we do, a lot of the time. But the problem is, of course, is that in this collage aesthetic of all this information, all these perspectives coming from all these different points of view, it's consuming people's attention. It's a cognitive load, which is why some of us take screen breaks, right, for a couple of days. Try and go on holiday. Try and pretend you haven't got your phone with you. Never works. Because attention is a resource. A person's only got so much attention that they can give. And part of the relationship that I want to build with durable design is about being respectful of people's attention, whether I work alongside them as a colleague, or whether I'm trying to do stuff for them as a client, or whether I'm trying to serve them as part of my audience for the work that I'm creating. And one of the ways that I do this is I do it with two little words, impact and immersion. This is one of my little frames, my little sort of lenses that I look through in terms of my own work. Because I often find we're either designing for one or the other of these, or both at the same time. Impact being, these are my kids, by the way, right? Yeah. Well, when they were cute, they're not like that anymore. Having a marked effect or influence. Impact is basically what advertising is doing all the time. It's trying to have a quick impact on you, grab your attention, get you to notice something. And immersion, obviously, is when you get much more immersed in something or other. Like when you're playing a game, when you're reading a book, or even when you're reading an article these days. That will count as immersion for me, as long as it's not, tiny with 2 paragraphs and just to catch a headline to get you to look at the advertising. And using impact and immersion is about using interruption carefully, deliberately. And then typesetting, which is an obvious example for me, this is how you would interrupt a sentence, and this is how you would not interrupt a sentence. And if any of you have read an ebook recently, this is what happens all the time to me. I can't help but notice. We're very resilient as human beings. We kind of can skip over problems that we have in typesetting. But I can't. It's rage-inducing. The Kindle is on the way out the door. I have to go grab it and go like, don't do that, because that's expensive. So when you're interrupting, it's really careful to do how you do it. Deliberate interruptions are good. That's really crazy, by the way. I kind of hope that still exists, because I kind of half want to just go see it just for the hell of it. Like, what? But you've got to be really careful how you do the interruptions, whether it's for impact or immersion. Right? Because if you don't get the tone right, people are going to be annoyed. Yeah? Like me with my Kindle, or if there's too much advertising coming your way, or whatever else it might be. Designing interruptions is almost an art in of itself. And I would say that's almost at the core of what design is managing interruptions. Because when you give people the opportunity to interact with things, right, you don't know what's going to happen. Josh is ace. I'm just saying. Josh got up there. Josh got a pole, man. And I sprayed high things when I was a kid, right? It's a lot of effort. You had to think about this. Josh is a designer. So what do we need to understand here? We need to understand the real-world context in which people are operating. And we need to understand what kind of spaces we're designing for them to do things in, and how we design those spaces to respect their attention. Because we're living in this collage, aesthetic, crazy, multi-dimensional informational age. So another thing that I use is enacted versus emergent narratives. An enacted narrative is one where you want people to follow a set path, 1, 2, 3, 4, to an endpoint. Think of a checkout, for example. That's an enacted narrative. You might go off it for a minute, come back, but it's still a very linear path. It's an enacted narrative. But any kind of task that ends up that has a single focus point is an enacted narrative. And Henry Jenkins, who co-founded the contemporary media course at MIT, he wrote about this in 2004. And the other thing that I use is emergent narratives, spaces designed to be rich with narrative potential. Think, in a way, social networks are emergent narratives. But there are also loads of other emergent narratives that we are designing and we're working for all the time. Any app, when people can use any app or any site to tell a story of some kind, even if it's just storing a couple of data points, it's an emergent narrative. So, durable design has a component. And these emergent narratives, enacted narratives, impact immersion, those are just my tools that I use in my practice to try and understand what I'm doing in terms of making the relationships that I'm having durable or not with customers and with colleagues and with everybody else. Being inclusive is really important to me because it's a subset, really, of a durable relationship, a durable design relationship. And obviously inclusive means not excluding anybody. Because when you exclude people, it's really annoying, right? And I just love this GIF. I can't look at it without remembering how much I laughed when I saw it for the first time. But no, I'm not going to stop there. We'll carry on. It's so good. I want to punch Thor so bad. Because inclusive does mean colleagues too. It's not just about accessibility. For so long, and I still see this every day, I still see it with people that I work with. Design gets chucked over the fence, and something else gets chucked over the fence. There's all this segmentation, all these silos that people are still working in. And actually, the only way, as we've heard today, and as you'll continue to hear from loads of people, the only way we all know to do effective work is to talk to other people that we have to work with. You know, everything that I design, if I have the slightest doubt that something I'm working on will be a development burden for the people who are going to have to build it alongside me, I talk to them. It's just logic, isn't it? But so being inclusive means, I like that as well, just saying. Being inclusive also means including colleagues. One of the things about this modern era of design, when I first started in design, there was no such thing as UX design. It didn't exist. There wasn't any such thing as service design. That didn't exist either. Who counts themselves as UX designers or service designers? That's very courageous of you. There's only 2 of you to admit it. I can't believe there's only 2 in the room. That's a massive problem. Because actually, I think we're all UX designers and we're all service designers in the practice that we have anyway. It was a subset of my practice all the way through. So data became really big, right, in the last 10 years. We've got to have data. We've got to use data to prove our arguments and prove the direction we want to go in and who we're going to serve and who we're going to look at. Because data's got a better idea, right? Data knows. Data is science. And science is the trump card. There's a lot of validity in that. I wouldn't ever doubt it. I'm not Trump. So, yeah, but data is actually so far. Because when people say to me, we know our audience, we've got all this data, all these metrics on who they are and how they behave and what they do, of course it's woolly, isn't it? Because my answer is, okay, are they your audience? Because I like these guys. I don't even know what they're actually trying to say. Like, we're an ass for sitting here playing music, or I don't know what they're doing, but they're awesome. But one thing we know for sure about being inclusive is we don't understand really what people are doing sometimes, and we have to be really careful about the conditions in which they're operating. Even if it's a colleague who's in a bit of a bad mood that day, right? That's a simple thing about context we don't understand, and we're probably very British and we don't like to ask. Because there are no edge cases for me at all. I don't believe in this phrase, edge cases. It annoys me. Edge cases is just a really easy way of excluding people. They're an edge case. And truthfully, it's just people trying to get to do stuff while they're really distracted and there's loads of other things going on for them because we live in this collage aesthetic world. Because fundamentally, there are a lot of us, and we're all doing different kinds of stuff, especially in the developing world, which is a massive part of everyone's audience really these days. Has to be a massive part of everyone's audience. Because like it or not, they actually have money too. I tell myself that all the time. Because I have a colleague who used to work on these guys, Nokia's. Anybody else work on Nokia S40 Symbian? One person, okay. Because in India, with 1.3 billion people, Nokia had a 54% market share in 2009. Think about that, 2009. That's after the iPhones came out. Nokia was 54% of everybody with a phone in India. Any phone. In 2009, there were 159 million Nokia 5230s sold. How do you even make 159 million, right? It's definitely way beyond the arts and crafts movement, let's just say that. And in 2018, 360 million smartphones exist in that subcontinent. And I have a colleague who worked at WhatsApp. He's a friend, and he basically did all the development for WhatsApp for Symbian, for Nokia. And he's a good mate. He doesn't want me to use his name. But he told me the story, and I was fascinated by it. In 2014, there was over 50 million people using WhatsApp in India, mostly down because of his work. That's an incredible thing to do as a developer, I think. Also, there's a lot of people relying on you not to get it wrong. It's a lot of pressure. Luckily, he's a very chill guy. And in the same year, WhatsApp sold for 19 billion, which is just kind of obscene, really. But it goes to show how much value they put on WhatsApp's access to markets through things like Symbian and Nokia and devices that we wouldn't have even considered having in our pocket at that time, really. Because what did WhatsApp do? So what WhatsApp did is they tried to support all handsets. That was a policy they had internally. They also wanted to help people who had to pay for SMS, which is a normal thing in the developing world. You have to pay for SMS usually, or we just get it as part of our package. They wanted to focus on what people are actually trying to do, not just give them the features for the sake of it. They wanted to give people the ability to send messages anywhere in the world to any device if they could. And they used native controls and they enhanced from there. And this is critical. The developing world starts to drive the developed world. This is how WhatsApp became so successful. Auntie in India has got WhatsApp on her phone because that's the cheapest way she can communicate, and she hasn't got a lot of cash. So Auntie speaks to her nephew who's living in the States and says, can you use WhatsApp? Because if you guys remember, and you may do, WhatsApp was kind of like an outlier. No one was really interested in WhatsApp. It was kind of crappy. Kind of sucked. It was like, WhatsApp, who uses that? And suddenly WhatsApp went from that to being, everyone's got it. And who's got WhatsApp on their phone today? Right, okay. And that is directly related to the inclusivity that WhatsApp built into their product. The durability of the relationships that they built with their customers by understanding the context they were operating in. And we're all using WhatsApp because the developed world used it first. They led the way. So the last thing on my list today, because I've been trying to go quick, is, I just like this picture of Land Rover, by the way. I actually just want one if you guys want to buy me a present, if I do all right. Chip in, crowdfund, Pioneer Fund. Anyway, the company is called coolvintage.com. Check it out, because although we're not supposed to be driving petrol vehicles anymore, this is amazing. But that's what WhatsApp is for me. It's like the Land Rover Defender of apps. And they're building in, and they built in an understanding. Okay, it's Facebook now. Everyone's left. Everyone's bailed, gone to work for Signal, or whoever else they might do. Okay? But the principles that they started out with are still the same ones that we need to be paying attention to, I think, today, still in our work, if we can, about the relationships that we build and how inclusive we are with our work when the opportunity presents itself to be. So the last thing on my list was aesthetic. And this is super short, because I'm a designer, so I like pretty things. They don't really have to serve a purpose sometimes. I just generally like them. If I didn't hold myself back, I'd probably have lots more bowls and crockery in my place than I would ever need, because I like them a lot. But aesthetics for me is not about that. Aesthetics is about emotional aesthetics. It's about the kind of feeling and emotion that we try and engender with our work by making it durable, by making it inclusive. So aesthetics it's defined as giving pleasure, but actually I would say it's giving any kind of emotion, eliciting some kind of emotion through beauty, through a sense of beauty. There's no such thing as identifying that is beautiful and that is not. That's called taste, right? Beauty is what you perceive in something, an object, a person, a situation, context. But beauty is also about form, and that's what we work with. We work with form, we work with interfaces. And interfaces send messages, because our brain has a little bit in the middle called the amygdala. And the amygdala is the lizard brain, and it receives sensory input, but it has no language. What that means is the amygdala is where you hear music and you can't explain what it sounds like. The amygdala is where you receive the sensory input about what this color is, and then someone asks you to describe it and you don't know, so you say it's greeny brown. Okay? When we're dumbfounded and we have no language to describe things, what we're doing is we're receiving sensory input, but we haven't had a chance yet to process it through our brain, and we don't have the vocabulary necessary to describe it. Emotion. And as an example, here's a word from Malay, set in a typeface called Graveblade by Typodermic. And here's another word in Malay, set in a typeface called Bellow. See those lovely curves? Aren't they lovely? And those were the actual words. Just a really simple example. First typeface, Typodermic. Everything culturally about us tells us to interpret this as somewhat aggressive, maybe even associated with the Nazis, right? But actually somewhat aggressive, angular. Second one, soft, gentle. But those are the actual words. So aesthetics really sometimes means the words don't matter. Because there was this great paper, and some people don't agree with this, but I think it's good. It said that aesthetics does not affect perceived usability, but usability has an effect on post-use perceived aesthetics. It's such an academic phrase, right? Post-use perceived aesthetics. What it basically means is that sometimes things that look good, and if they don't work well, we don't think they're beautiful anymore, right? That's true, isn't it? How many times have you picked something up and you thought, oh, this is amazing, you've used it, it's been absolute utter crap, and thrown it away? Or you've gone to a website and you've gone like, oh, these guys did a awesome job, you tried to use it and you're just pulling your hair out, biting the monitor. Is that just me? But this is a good point, though, that if something works really well, if something is durable, is inclusive, is aesthetic, and it works for us, we start to develop an emotional response to it, we start to like it, we start to think of it as a beautiful thing, or at least a valuable thing at the very least. Because usable is beautiful, for me, in my practice. And that has to come first. Everything flows from that. And usable, for me, is design that's durable, inclusive, and aesthetic. Thank you.